All right. So let's get into it. You asked that I walk you through these two proposals. That's correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I think first off, the most important thing is to just get the context and what this issue was like created from was this discussion or this two comments really from Alvin and myself. Uh, Specifically, how it started was there on GridStack itself. There is this comment from a contributor or maintainer, not exactly sure, about
He is if it's Odamensny or whatever his name is, he's the maintainer slash
okay,
controlling owner, I guess, of the repo.
okay, well then all the more reason to, I guess, respect their opinion and expertise and take their yeah, take it for what it is. They're saying like the main summary is it's best to let GridStack do all the DOM manipulation.
Yeah, it
And
gets very confused
I
if you
can,
try to do
yes.
it outside of GridStack.
So what we've done to try and combat that is unfortunately do the most basic workaround, which is every time there is a minor change to the grid, we just re-render the entire grid.
Yeah.
We recreate the entire component, which reinitializes grid stack. It does everything from start to finish. Um, we've also had issues with making the and I think it's something that I've brought up in discussion somewhere here in this issue where we were talking about like how difficult it's been to try and make GridStack just fully observe the dashboard configuration, and
Hmm.
that we have to use these action methods that are passed to the slot to add and remove components. Um,
Yes.
and with that, like the current code is completely view dependent. So GridStack is basically slave to, or I guess that's a bad word to use. It's basically completely dependent on view. And it's listening to, let's say, view changes, because what we're doing at the bottom is using V4 to actually render these widgets instead of registering them with GridStack.
Yes.
And then at the same time, we're updating GridStack later on when like this changes, but then we're running into a conflict where Vue does something that GridStack isn't aware of, or vice versa, and the components get out of sync and you can't drag or drop them. They're not updating, like a bunch of like weird behavior starts happening.
Hmm.
Right. So the solution, one of the solutions to this that was posted beneath that comment from the maintainer was here's a Vue 3 solution. And this is like pretty neat and small. And this does work nice in Vue 3. Uh,
Mm.
because you have a nice, neat little render function in Vue 3. Vue 2 does not have anything as that. You can create a functional component, which uses render with create component, but that only gets called um, when it's created and on updated.
Hmm.
So it's essentially the same as blasting, like putting a template in your component and using V4. There is practically no difference to it.
Hmm.
Um, but I still wanted to see if this is possible. And this brings us to the suggestions or the suggested or the findings that I have on this issue, which is to refactor GridStack wrapper to make the, I guess, interface just simpler and use observability on the object instead of these like action methods. All right, with me
Hmm.
so far.
Yeah, no, entirely. It makes a lot more sense when you're explaining it to me than
Okay.
me
That
trying to
was
get my head
that was a
around it.
lot of context, but I feel like it was important just before we jump into here. So this first approach, what I wanted to do is just take this comment here and see if I can do it in Vue 2.
Hmm.
It turns out you actually can, which I was surprised by. Uh, Basically, what you're doing is creating a new, I think, Vue application pretty much, because it's not hooked into the current Vue application. It's not like just creating a component. You're registering a new Vue instance.
Yeah.
So I'm importing, and this is just a snippet. This, yeah, a patch of something here would probably have been nicer to look at. But I'm creating a new panel. Okay, wait. Let me start with the start. Sorry. The issue with letting GridStack completely run the show and do all the state management is that our dashboard isn't just a bunch of DOM elements, but it is also a custom component in each widget, and that's
Hmm.
GridStack like speak. So in each GridStack widget, we are rendering a panel which contains a visualization. So we need to create custom view components in each one. And GridStack can't do that because it is just using native DOM elements to do all of its work.
Yeah.
So how do we fit into that? Well, one way is to use this view extend and then creating a new view instance uh, each time a GridStack widget gets created. So that's what I did here. The issue
Don't
is, mhm, go ahead.
don't we have a aim to have one view app per page?
Yes.
Okay. So this would
So
break that in this
this
scenario.
would break that, but there is
Yeah.
precedent in that it's already being broken.
Okay.
It's already something that's being done. And as you can see here, it's being done in a very similar way. And there's also a comment saying that observability is completely broken. And the reason I
Yeah.
think it's broken is my understanding is that this is a completely new view instance. If you go into like view dev tools, you'll see that it's not a child component. It's
Yeah. So
completely on its own
context.
island.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Different context. You have to
exactly.
literally switch the DevTools to that new context for it to pick up anything.
Yeah. And that also means that stuff like provide inject just doesn't work. I was
Yep.
surprised by this because I thought, oh, you could still, similar to how we bootstrap a view application, we can do provide. This just doesn't work. And it also means that all observability we need to manually call. So each time a property gets added or removed, this is also something that we need to do here to maintain that.
Right.
So this gets a thumbs down for me while we're using Vue 2. If we've already upgraded to Vue 3 or if that's around the corner, which I think it's close but not quite yet there, uh,
Yeah.
I don't think this is a viable solution because number one, it breaks that principle of only having one Vue application. Now we're talking about having 30 or potentially infinite on a
Yeah.
single page.
It's
Yeah.
an ON situation
Yes.
here.
And it's just a complete pizza to maintain. So
Hmm.
it looks horrible and it feels horrible working with it. Okay.
Yes.
Any
You're
questions
doing
about
all
that?
the work. No, I agree.
Okay.
I don't think it's a great option. I mean, if it's the only option, we have to do it. But it sounds like you have a better idea
Yeah.
after
So
enjoying your weekend.
So this weekend I had a bit of like a epiphany or a aha moment while I was just sitting and like watching TV. But like, what
Oh.
if we flip the script? And because what this is essentially doing is we're taking the grid stack, each grid stack widget's DOM element and rendering a view component inside of it.
Hmm.
So I thought to myself, wait, wouldn't it be way simpler to just let Vue render these components using a v-for or a render function? And then we move them manually into the GridStack widgets. And that means that GridStack still has control over these view rendered components because it's tied DOM elements. So it can just move it around. It can
Yeah.
delete them. It can add them, and we can just listen for GridStack adding it and then create a new view component each time. And that's pretty much what I did in this spike here. So the real magic here is that this application is completely driven by GridStack. Um, all the DOM, like it takes in a configuration, which is here called serialized data,
Hmm.
and it's completely driven by that. It loads with that dashboard configuration. When you're adding a new panel, it gets added by GridStack. when you remove a panel, it gets removed by GridStack. Nothing is being added or removed by Vue. And Vue, all Vue is doing here is it's listening for changes. And that's this bit of code here, where I'm first initializing the Vue grid components based on the initial state of GridStack. And then I'm listening for any change. So change, added, and removed events. And then
Hmm.
updating the Vue state based on the changes that happen inside GridStack. And then what I'm doing for each item, so each time the grid components array, which is the array of custom elements, gets updated, I'm using the updated lifecycle hook to then move the custom component into the GridStack widget.
Right. So the idea would be to use Vue as the template engine, GridStack as the DOM manipulation engine,
Pretty
uh,
much, yeah.
and then Vue is thereafter being used as a data store essentially for us when we need to submit it to GraphQL.
Yeah. Vue is like doing the object observability, and GridStack, you're right, is making all the DOM changes. And furthermore, Vue is then only used to render the custom elements. And that's it. And to my surprise, I was a bit concerned about this, about moving a Vue rendered element with JS onto a non-Vue like rendered component, but it seems like Vue is completely happy with it. And I have a demo here. Um, and the first thing I want to show you is this behavior where we have this new draft state that's happening here. We don't even need a draft object because this is
Hmm.
all now um, inside GridStack. It's being managed inside its own instance. And if I click load save data, in which case we're going back to the original save state, it does everything for us.
Yeah.
I didn't need to check what the delta is on the object and remove and add and do stuff. And we can see here based on the events that we have one widget that moved, and this was this one. It moved back here. It removed three ones that was added, and that's it. Super easy. Um, and the secret sauce here that makes everything work is this load grid.load, which in the documentation tells you that it can automatically add or remove DOM elements. So this solves every single problem to solve that we have in this issue, which is one, we want to make uh, our GridStack wrapper completely observable, or have
Hmm.
it completely observe the dashboard object for all DOM manipulation. That solves it. And it solves the thing of like having edge cases where we're rendering both with Vue and with GridStack. And it's kind of working, but not really. And there's like a bunch of conflict situations, which we're just solving by nuking the instance every time something changes. So yeah, any questions about that?
No, I've been racking my brain throughout your whole uh, what's the demo, trying to figure out what would be the downside to this approach in comparison to what we're doing now. I can't think of one immediately.
I cannot think of a single downside, except I have only have one concern,
Yeah.
and that is this bit that I posted here. And I'm still unsure if it's a good idea to interfere with Vue's rendering by moving and removing DOM elements with JS. Uh,
The the only way you the only you'd have to add routing to your dummy. That would be the way to test how that gets handled. If you had two different style of dashboards and a routing listing page like we've got in your dummy in your demo application, and you click one, make some changes, go out, go back in? Does it keep the changes? Go out? Does it go to the second list item with a completely different configuration? Does it retain or
Oh, it
you know
would. It
how do and does it drop those elements from the DOM properly, etc., etc.? Because that's what we're
yeah.
most interested in. Does it unmount
No,
properly?
I does it unmount properly? That is the question. Does it do
Yeah,
everything else? Yes. Because
which is where the
that is what
routing
this
would come in.
save and load button and clear is doing. And you can also see in views like DevTools here that when we're adding, it's popping up. And when
Mm-hmm.
I'm removing, it is removing the right ones. So this tells me already that Vue is fully aware of what's happening. And I've tried to code this in a way where I'm doing as little as possible to interfere with Vue, where I'm first, where's the code here? The only real interference that I'm doing is I'm appending, I'm moving the Vue rendered v4 panel into GridStack's part of the DOM.
Yeah, which is an object. It's a object reference rather than a clone, rather than a
Yeah,
shallow clone. Therefore, there's still whatever Vue's done to bind itself to the DOM elements is still maintained.
exactly.
Those watches and event tracking, and it's the internalized ID that Vue uses to identify different elements is all still
Hmm.
there.
And
So
then,
it from Vue's point of view, it doesn't really care where it is in the DOM
right.
because
So
it doesn't need to go searching for it. It already has the ID.
exactly.
I'm getting rid of you.
And it seems like with Vue's tree shaking of like minimal DOM updates,
Mm,
it also doesn't seem to be an issue. Um, the other thing that I've done is instead of letting GridStack remove the entire DOM tree for each widget, I'm first splicing the Vue grid components so that Vue gets an update to remove this from its own like internal like object tree basically.
hmm
And then I'm removing the node tree. I'm not sure if this is required because if I do it the other way around, Vue is still perfectly happy, it seems like. But I don't know if this is causing some sort of like memory leakage in the background where Vue can't properly remove it from its own object tree because the node no longer exists. So I'm rather doing it in this way around just to be safe.
Would it
But
not just be watching for the unloaded event on that particular element? Wouldn't you just track it through standard DOM events?
I don't know.
No, neither do I. I mean, you could use a memory profiler on your demo to see if memory keeps ticking up. Um,
As far as I can tell, it doesn't. So
yeah,
I
well,
did look into this. The bigger question here is just I think I want to ask one of our Vue experts like Natalia to just ask her what am I missing here? What's wrong with this? Because from an outside perspective, this seems to work without any issues. It's like almost too good to be true.
I think it's a very um, intelligent approach to the problem, I'd say. Um, I'd also, if we're able to, it'd be great to be able to respond on that issue and just say, for Vue 2, we've taken this approach. Just if anyone else comes along and
Yeah.
sees Vue 2 specific solution to this problem. Obviously, it's very us specific, but I mean, your demo is a great example of what you could of something to share. The
Yeah,
demo app you've created.
I totally agree. Like this is not us specific, this is just Vue
No,
2 because
yeah,
this is
looks
just a early
exactly what
demo.
I'd expect to find on a GitHub repo
Right?
demo
And
page.
it has that beautiful Christmas colors.
It does. And the Windows 98 close buttons.
Yeah, it's perfect in every way. Um, but yeah,
More
so
beautiful than my firstborn child.
following that big discussion, uh, yeah, do you have any unknowns for you? What is your feeling on either approach? Um, yeah,
I mean, definitely option two. I would have a bigger reservation against it if we hadn't already refactored GridStack out of our
Yeah.
main component. The fact that it's now isolated um, makes this feel more like a logical next step. I feel like your approach makes very sound sense. I am also very happy with the magic. I would like to, like you say, understand this magic that Vue's accomplishing. How is it accomplishing it? Because then that would broaden our understanding of where we might find an edge case. So
Mhm.
definitely worth asking a Vue expert like Natalia, um, or Mikhail, or anyone who's got a core understanding of the internals of Vue. Um, but yeah, I can't. Other than that, I think it's great. I think you should spend more weekends not thinking about work.
I mean, then I'm just gonna work 24/7. But
No, not
I,
thinking about work because then that's when you come up with the choices. It's churning away in the back of your head.
yeah, but I had to develop this on a Sunday because I couldn't even leave it until
Mhm.
Monday to just complete this. I had to get it like out of my mind. But I agree, doing this in the customizable dashboard component would have felt like a no-no because it is using different logic than what we use in most of our Vue components. So it does feel good to have it in a grid stack specific component. And that was the whole
Mm.
idea about making this grid stack specific components, that we can do grid stack things and make it a black box. And all you need to interact with, ideally, is just this dashboard object, and
Yes,
everything gets done for you.
it's the same approach we take with eCharts, siloing that off into a black box and doing eChart specific stuff. Then we provide a
Mhm.
more unified API on the other end for people
Exactly.
to interact with. So yeah, I really like this approach. I think it's a very good thing. I'm very excited to see it actually take place because GridStack has been not that fun to work with over the last year,
It
trying to
has,
wrangle that
yeah.
massive component.
I mean, part of it is just that I think we were using grid stack a bit wrong. And part of it is it doesn't gel that well with Vue 2.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like this whole exercise has given me a much better understanding of GridStack since I read through the entire API documentation looking for like any bits and pieces that we can use.
Mm,
But yeah, that was working. But yeah, thanks for
no.
your feedback. I feel like once Alvin has given his blessing, I'll get this out of planning breakdown with a plan for the second solution.
Okay.
And
Brilliant.
it should be pretty minimal actually to get this all sorted. I have no idea how we're going to test it because it's all grid stack events, which seem pretty difficult to test, but we'll figure it out.
Mm, I guess we're gonna have to make a mock, aren't we? A stub, a custom stub.
Quite a big one
Yeah.
because it's a custom event handler on an initialized object. Um, I've already actually tried something like that with the whole grid stack MR, and it didn't work. Anyway,
We may we may need an integration test rather than a unit.
yeah, I'm gonna stop the recording here, or at least pause it.